So the first thing that we're looking at always is the grip. So you have an Eastern forehand grip, it's perfectly fine. I do like the ready position here. It's a pretty low center of gravity. Let's look at the take back now. And that's where it becomes pretty clear what we talked about yesterday, that you are not very actively using your right arm to help you get that unit turn a little bit deeper. So to me, it almost looks a little bit more as if your right arm is just coming around because the rest of your body is turning, instead of the right arm being actually one of the drivers to get that whole rotation going. So let's see how I'm doing here. My right arm is a little more active, a little longer on the racket, and it's helping me to get a little bit more of a deeper unit turn. So if we're comparing that here, we're in a similar position now. Both of us have our body almost on the back foot. There's a little bit of air under your right foot, which means that you do have your body weight on your back foot. So that's ideal. You do have your racket face above the wrist, but I'm seeing your right hip pointing to about the net post. Whereas in the deepest stage of my unit turn, it's pointing head on. And I would say if I'm on the other side of the net here somewhere, you would see my right shoulder blade, whereas we can't see yours. So you want to come around that far that somebody on the other side of the net will see your right shoulder blade, and your right hip here wants to come around a little bit more, just to create a little bit more energy that you can then transfer into the shot. The second thing that I'm seeing here is you are getting that wrist laid back, and that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what you need. This is a really good cocking position, meaning that the butt cap points at the ball. However, it is a very shallow take back. Ideally, you would have a little bit more of a loop to get under the ball. And so you're staying under or over what I just drew. And what happens there is that you're hitting pretty flatly. And it looks a little bit like a slap coming here. And then you tend to actually having to reach for the ball a little bit more. And that is really problematic, especially on lower balls, because you can't really brush under the ball anymore and create topspin. The second thing that I would like is just a little bit more rotation of your arm, actually of your elbow, instead of pushing through as much, because you see that here, the side of the racket with which you hit the ball, so the side with which I made contact here starts to rotate over the ball. And that is coming a little bit more from the elbow and of course also the wrist. Whereas here, when we're comparing that at this stage, my racket face already starts to close. And then when I'm done with my swing here, the side with which I actually hit the ball is pointing to the back fence. Eventually yours will come around, but very, very late. So again, that's a little bit too flat of a stroke for me, especially with the pace that you want to hit. If you were to just really slowly hit the ball, you can control that, but you have a pretty fast swing, and that's really difficult to control if you're that flat striking over the ball. So let's go back to that one more time. On your take back, right arm needs to be a little bit more active in bringing your upper body around. And then I would want a little bit more of a loop to get under the ball. And we also talked yesterday about using your back leg to load a little bit more and transfer your body weight into the ball. We worked a lot on semi-open stance on higher, deeper balls, but the same is true for a closed stance, and you're doing better on this stroke here, on the second forehand. You have your back leg loaded. Your entire body weight is on your left leg. You see that here because your right foot is up in the air, and then you're striding into the ball. but again, it's fairly flat. And you're pushing that wrist through. So at this point here, I would already like to see the racket face closing over the ball, brushing more over the ball so you can create a little bit more topspin. And to me, even more important, more net clearance and more control of the ball. So back perspective, and it becomes pretty clear from this perspective that we have a little bit of work to do with the right arm. So your right arm does come back, so you're holding onto the racket, you're separating now, but it's just dropping down too fast a little bit. So when I'm taking my racket back here, see how long my racket is being held or guided by my right arm, and it continues to turn. So I do have my right arm parallel to the ground and actually parallel to the baseline here. And we see that here, your right arm starts to fall back and down, and you're almost tucking it in because you just really have to hurry up to catch up to the ball. So we want a sooner take back, because see here you have the balls bouncing about there. See if I can freeze that right here. So this is about where the ball is bouncing, and my ball is still in the air and I'm already completely turned. So you're just waiting a little too long to initiate your turn, and then it's not deep enough. So again, the difference here, this is probably the maximum of my turn as my arm starts to then drop. My right arm starts to drop, and your maximum turn here in comparison is about here. So we see that your left shoulder doesn't really come around all the way. It's pointing at an angle up to about here, and so does your left hip. Whereas my hip looks back to the back fence, and I'm even turned further here. So that is really what you want to work on a little bit more. Sooner take back, so you have more time to get a deeper turn, and let that right arm really help you with that. And the difference then really is you have to come up to the ball pretty quickly. There's very little of a loop, and you're having to slap up to the ball almost to catch up to the ball. And we're seeing also that you don't have a whole lot of room between your upper body and your rib cage in preparation here. So as I'm coming to the ball, I have a little bit more air right here. So you're not getting as jammed. And we had that a bunch of times yesterday, and I think this ball is an example of that. You're hitting a bunch of frames, and that is because of that, because the spacing is not quite where it should be.